Well, hello, cutie. I'm back. And today we have another episode of Beauty and the Bibliophile. If you're new here, welcome to my channel, first of all, and welcome to the cute life. I'm your cult leader, Leah. If you're not new here, thank you for returning for another cult meeting. As often as I can, I do a series called Beauty and the Bibliophile where I do my makeup and I tell you about the latest book that I've read because it's just fun. If you don't know what a bibliophile is, it is a lover and a collector of books. That would be me. Today's book is The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, and this came out in 1949. This book is a trip. It is a wonderful book. I encourage all of you to read this book, even if you listen to this whole summary. You should definitely get the book. This book has changed my perspective on many things, but especially on dreams and stories. And if you're into stories, if you're into fairy tales like I am, which I'm sure you've gathered by this point if you watch this channel with any regularity, you'll know I'm obsessed with fairy tales. And this book is going to explain why and why these tales, folklore, and myths are actually super important to culture as a whole, but to us on an individual basis as well. But spoiler alerts, if you're thinking about reading this book and you don't want to know anything about it, don't watch this video. If you're thinking about reading this book, but you're not sure, this would be a really great video for you because I'm going to be giving a very general summary. There is no way I can go into everything in this book. For the sake of time, we would be here forever. There is also a lot of storytelling in the book. He gives a lot of examples of stories from around the world, and they're all wonderful, but there's just not time to go into all of them. So in this summary, I'll be mentioning 2 or 3, but we're mostly just going to focus on the principles that he discusses. So if that sounds good to you, well, cuddle up, get a snack, and stay tuned. My hair would not do anything today, nothing. So The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, and this came out in 1949. So before we get started, there's a word we need to go over that's used a lot in this book, and that is the word archetype. So let's go over the definition. So the literal definition is the original pattern or model from which all things of the same kind are copied or on which they are based, a model or first form like a prototype. But in Jungian psychology, which is the context that we will be using it, the definition is a collectively inherited unconscious idea, pattern of thought, image, etc., universally present in individual psyches. By the way, if you are curious at all about the products that I'm using, they will be listed in the description box below. So anyway, hopefully that definition was clear. It's definitely not a word that most of us use in our daily language. It's a very useful word, and I've found myself using it a lot more lately. And you'll see why. Also, before we get started, this was a very difficult book. Very amazing book, but a little, intellectually challenging. So in order for me to really get it right in me trying to summarize it to you, I may have to take it real slow. There may be a lot of cuts in this one. Joseph Campbell, the author of this book, he studied myth and mythology and what he called mankind's one great story. And this book uses psychoanalysis to uncover the truths underlying religion, mythology, and fairy tales. The book gives the example of the story of the stork. We, as adults, we know what this stork signifies. But the child that you're telling this little tale to doesn't. The child only hears the distorted truth. And in a way, society today has kind of become that child. They focus on the stories and not the underlying truths the stories are telling. So throughout the inhabited world, there's always been myth and stories, and they have all been the basis for everything else that humans have created. Myth is how the energies of the cosmos almost channel human beings in order for the human beings to create. So religions, philosophies, art, science, technology, these have all bubbled up into existence through myth. Okay, I'm gonna let my skincare sit for a few minutes before we move on to makeup. Now, Joseph Campbell believed that myth and dreams were very closely related. The archetypes of myth and folklore and fairy tales are the same archetypes that inhabit our dreams. Now, dreams are spontaneous productions of our psyche, and each dream carries with it the seedling of its source. So in other words, the symbolism that our dreams carry have come from all over the world, across cultures and time. Psychoanalysis has shown that archetypes and lessons of myth and fairy tales have survived into modern times, and they have survived through each of our own individual psyches. And myth and dreams are both symbolic of the psyche itself. So our subconscious is constantly sending up images and messages into our conscious mind. This may be through a dream or a daydream or through some induced chemical imbalance or natural, but our brains are more than just our consciousness. It actually goes much deeper than that into Aladdin-like caves. Now, in these caves are precious jewels, but also dangerous jinn. Jinn is an old word for like a genie, which are our psychological powers that we are either unaware of or haven't integrated into our overall psyche. And these jewels and jinn, they live deep within our unconscious mind, and they stay there unsuspected until something triggers them, like a smell or a taste or anything that just triggers something in our subconscious, and then messages begin to be transmitted from the unconscious to the conscious. And that could be in the form of a dream or a daydream or just some kind of other spontaneous thought. Now, these thoughts could be pleasant or they could be unpleasant. So unpleasant, in fact, that they may even threaten the very fabric of our life. But they can be fascinating as well because they hold the keys that open the realm to the adventure of our inner hero. And this adventure, which can be sometimes very scary, is the discovery of our true self. And this adventure may lead to the destruction of our life, or it may lead to the building of a really wonderful and amazing life. So the first job of the hero, which is all of us, is to first retreat from the physical world into the psychological realm of our own mind, where our real difficulties and challenges lay. We need to be able to pinpoint what these challenges and difficulties are and to eradicate them. The hero has to be able to break through the undistorted, direct experience and assimilation of the archetypes within our own mind. The second task of the hero is then to return to the physical realm and teach others what he's learned. Now, each of us are this hero, and we each must go on our own adventure, literally and psychologically. And I know that sounds a little scary, but we do not have to do it alone. The heroes of all time have gone before us. All we have to do is follow the pattern of the hero path. And where we thought we'd find a monster, we shall find a god. Where we thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outward, we shall come to the center of our own existence. Where we thought we'd be alone, we shall be with all the world. And I thought that was so beautiful. So I just read it straight to you because I did not want to mess up how beautiful that was. Anyway, so it is the business and point of myths and fairy tales to reveal to us our own dark interiors and how they work. The stories represent psychological triumphs or failures. Even when the story is of an actual person, the story is usually presented in a dreamlike presentation. Also, not the point that in these stories such and such happened. The point is that before such and such happened, this other, more important psychological event had to happen within the labyrinth of your own subconscious. So the standard path of the adventure of the hero across all cultures and time is separation, initiation, return. An example of this would be Prometheus ascending to the realm of the gods, stealing the fire, and then returning. So as we mentioned, the hero's adventure usually follows this pattern. First, a separation from the hero's world, then coming into some kind of source of power, and then returning home with that power. Now everywhere, no matter what the sphere of interest, whether it's religious, political, something else, personal, all accomplishments in these spheres are usually represented as some kind of dying to the world. The hero has to become reborn, so to speak, made great and filled with power. And there are innumerable myths and stories that can help us understand this. They can help us not only understand the myth, but also its application in modern life. So this book presents the hero's journey through different myths and fairy tales from across all cultures. There is a lot too, so I'm actually not going to spend too much time actually relaying the stories because we would be here forever. I'll share a few, but mostly we're just going to be focusing on the principles that these stories illustrate. So anyway, the first part of the book goes into detail on this hero's journey, the separation, initiation, return formula. Part 2 discusses the cosmogonic cycle. Now, the cosmogonic cycle is the continuous creation and destruction of the world that the hero is a part of. And it gives the adventure an interesting twist because it shows that the adventure that our hero is going on hasn't been about attainment, but of reattainment. It hasn't been about discovering something, it's been about rediscovering something, which is the hero's true self that's always been there. He discovers or rediscovers who he truly is. He even discovers the divine within, or what some would call God. So the two, the hero and his God, or the seeker and the found, are then understood as the inside and outside of a self-mystery, which is actually the same mystery of the physical world. The hero's great deed then is this coming into this knowledge and then bringing this knowledge back to others. So the first part that we already mentioned is the separation of the hero from the world that he knows. And this is first stimulated within the hero with the call to adventure. In the story of the Frog Prince, we can see an example of this call to adventure. So the story is there's a princess playing with her golden ball near a spring. And the princess drops the ball and loses it into the depths of this spring. And she's crying hysterically. She's so upset. And a frog appears and he's like, hey, I can go down and get your ball for you. But if I do, you have to promise to make me your little pet, to take care of me. Let me, eat from your plate and drink from your cup and sleep in your bed and just, overall take care of me. And the princess is like, oh, she agrees to this. So he goes down and he gets the ball for her. But when he gives it to her, she just takes it and runs off. She had no intention of ever keeping her promise. And she's thinking, well, he's just a frog. He'll go back down into his pond and he'll be perfectly happy. So this is an example of one of the ways in which the call to adventure can begin, by some kind of accident or chance meeting. The hero is then drawn into a relationship with forces that he doesn't understand. Now, Freud believed that there were no accidents. They're actually a result of suppressed desires and inner conflicts, that they are ripples on the surface of life produced by unknown psychic springs. Now, this accident or chance meeting in this fairy tale equates to a calling to destiny. In this fairy tale, the disappearance of the ball is the first sign of something coming for the princess. The frog is the second sign, and then the unkept promise is the third. So the frog's appearance is the call to adventure in this example. Frog represents the unconscious deep, where all the rejected, unrecognized, undeveloped aspects of the mind dwell. They're often dark, loathly, or terrifying, judged as evil by the world. But if one delves deep into those aspects, a way will be opened up to a part of the mind where the jewels glow the brightest. Now, regardless of whether the call to adventure is by chance or not, there will be a series of signs that become increasingly more intense until the summons, the call to adventure is answered. It just can't be denied anymore. So this first stage in the mythological journey signifies that destiny has called the hero, that there is something in his heart that longs to leave the world that he knows for something unknown. Now this unknown, fateful region, full of treasures and dangers, can be represented in many ways. It could be, a forest, a far off land, underneath the ocean, up in the sky, a lofty mountain. But regardless, it's a place that's full of magical creatures and impossible feats and superhuman deeds, unimaginable tortures, all kinds of stuff. So the hero can go on his journey completely on his own accord, or he may be forced into it by some kind of benign or evil agent, or the adventure may be on accident or just some kind of chance encounter with a passing phenomenon that lures the hero off of the normal path of society. Sometimes the hero is a reluctant one. He may not want to answer this call to adventure. He may be scared or just have other interests. But either way, it converts the adventure into a negative. It's kind of like life, actually. We may be presented with an opportunity, but we don't go with it for these reasons, fear, or usually fear. But regardless, then what manifests possibly is boredom or unnecessarily hard work or just losing motivation. And it turns our hero into someone that needs to be saved now. Then that leads to a creation of a whole other set of problems and the gradual disintegration. Every folktale and fairy tale make it clear that this refusal to heed the call to adventure is essentially saying that the hero refuses to give up his own selfish interests. The subject feels that their goals or ideals are more important or safer, and thus they fail to advance in life. So then the divinity within him becomes a terror, because if his own selfish interests are more important to him than destiny, it's like saying that he's his own god. Then God, who would be the power that leads to transcendence and growth, actually becomes the monster that he's going to have to battle eventually. Now, not all who hesitate to answer the call to adventure are selfish or misdirected. Psyche has many secrets stored away, but they will not be revealed unless required. So then sometimes the predicament that is causing the hero to not answer the call to destiny actually becomes the same predicament that leads to his eventual answering of the call to destiny. I know. It's a little confusing, but we'll figure out why in the end. For those who have not refused the call to adventure, their first encounter on their journey is with some kind of a protective figure. And this figure usually provides the hero with some kind of weapon or some sort of like protective force to help him along his journey. And this figure usually takes on, you know, some sort of magical type creature, like something supernatural, like a fairy godmother or an enchantress or like a wizard. Now, this kind of figure represents the protective power of destiny. And this power is always present in the sanctuary of the heart. One just has to believe and have faith, and these psychic guardians will appear. Now, having, you know, responded to the call to adventure and continuing on his path, the hero finds out that there are many psychic guardians that will appear and help him. Now, the hero to whom these beings and guardians appear to has typically voluntarily answered this call to adventure. And his answering this call to adventure is actually the first sign of the helper coming to help. But even for those who have refused the call to adventure and now are on their adventure forcefully, these guardians may still appear and probably will still appear because the reluctant hero kind of has to be saved himself now. Now, this salvation forces the hero into a situation against his will, but this is still in correspondence with the destiny of his life. Now, the next phase of the hero is the initiation, and this is where our hero goes through a series of tests and trials that are meant to keep him from accomplishing his task. The hero moves into a landscape full of unknown creatures where he must survive a succession of trials. And this is, you know, a favorite part of any mythological adventure. It has produced a world full of amazing literature that we all know and love. And during this part, he continues to meet, you know, magical and wonderful creatures that aid him and provide him with more tools and ways to get him through his trials. This is where he also may discover that there is some kind of all-prevailing power or force that is making sure that he accomplishes his superhuman tasks. Now, one of the most well-known examples of this difficult tasks motif is the story of Psyche trying to find her lost lover, Cupid. Now, in this story, the gender roles are reversed. Instead of a lover trying to find his bride, it is the bride trying to find her lover. And instead of a, you know, a jealous, overprotective father hiding the bride from her lover, it is a jealous mother, Venus, hiding her son, Cupid, away from Psyche. Now, when Psyche pleaded with Venus to let her see Cupid, Venus grabbed Psyche by the hair and like slammed her head on the ground. And then she gathered like a bunch of peas and beans and lentils and little tiny like seed type things and put them all in one huge heap. And she told Psyche, you know, if you want to see Cupid, like, pull these, you know, separate all these little tiny microscopic type seeds before the end of the night and you can see. But of course, this is like super tedious and impossible. But a bunch of ants came and helped Psyche sort them all out. Now, when Venus sees that she accomplished this task that she didn't think she'd be able to do, she's like, okay, well, fine. Now you need to go and find this golden wool. This golden wool for me on this sheep that has one long horn and a poisonous bite and is in some sort of inaccessible valley in a dangerous forest. But a green reed tells her how to accomplish this impossible task. And after she accomplished that, Psyche then told her to get her a bottle of water from on top of this very high mountain that was guarded by a dragon. But an eagle came along and helped her to accomplish this. But then, of course, that still wasn't good enough for Venus. So then she told Psyche, okay, go down to the underworld and bring me this box that was full of like supernatural beauty. She tries, Psyche, but then she runs into this other magical creature that tells her how to get down into the underworld. It also gives her money that she's going to have to pay to Charon to get her down to the underworld. And sops, which is like some kind of bread that's used for like dipping in like soups or sauces or something. But the word sops, interestingly enough, also means like kind of like a bribe or, you know, something you give someone to get them to do something that you want. Anyway, this creature gives Psyche sops to give to Cerberus. Now, if you don't know what this is all talking about, you may recall we did talk about these characters, Charon and Cerberus, before in our twisted tale of Hercules. If you remember, Charon is the character or creature that ferries souls from the land of the living to the underworld across the river Styx. Now, he'll carry you across, because that's his job. But if you pay him money, he'll move it along a little faster for you, which I find hilarious. I don't know why. And anyway, so that is what the money was for. That's why Psyche had the money. And then Cerberus is the three-headed dog that guards the entrance to the underworld to make sure no living souls are down there, because they're not supposed to be down there. She gives, you know, Sops basically a treat so she can get past him. Anyway, she accomplishes everything. Now this story of Psyche is just one of numerous, like literally innumerable kinds of stories that are like this. Now all of this represents the fact that anyone who decides to go on this adventure into the dark regions of your own mind, either intentionally or unintentionally, he will soon find himself in a landscape of all kinds of symbolic figures that are there to either be terrifying or helpful. And all of that is representative of one who can and has transcended and transmuted your own past conditioning. In our dreams, we encounter, you know, monsters and all kinds of stuff. And in these forms, we can see reflected not only the whole picture of our life, but also clues to what we must do to either, right wrongs or make a situation in our life better. And to save ourselves from the world and from our own destructive behaviors. Now, the original departure of, the hero from his home into the land of the unknown represents a series of conquests and moments of realization. Realizations like, dragons have to be slain and barriers overcome again and again and again. But all the while, you also get moments of joy and victory and glimpses of the prize that is coming. Now, a lot of times in this adventure, when all of the dragons and orcs have been overcome, there is some kind of mystical marriage between the hero and some kind of goddess type figure like a princess or a queen. Now, the most familiar figure of this type in fairy tales is Briar Rose, or what is more commonly known as Sleeping Beauty. She is the ultimate of ultimate beauty. She represents the highest object of desire. She is whatever initially lured the hero into wanting to go on his adventure. That's what she represents. She represents joy. She is the incarnation of the promise of perfection. She is the assurance that after everything that we have been through in this world, it is still possible to return to bliss. And in Freudian terms, this would be said as, she is the return to the good mother. And she is sleeping as a way to represent the fact that she's been sealed away or paused, kind of, so to speak, in time, so that we can take all the time that we need to accomplish our tasks, because our prize will be waiting for us. Also, side note, women in general, in the picture language of mythology, represent the known. The hero is the one who comes into knowledge, but she is the knowledge. She represents what is incapable of comprehending. Women, right? Now, the meeting of this goddess-like figure is the hero's final test of his talents. If he can get her to fall in love with him, then he will enjoy and know life for eternity. Hence, and they lived happily ever after. Now, when the hero in the story is a female, she too can win the ultimate prize of love. If we go back to the story of Psyche, after she had accomplished all these impossible tasks that Venus had her do, the god Jupiter ended up making her an elixir to make her immortal so that she could forever be with Cupid. The marriage that usually takes place between the hero and the princess goddess figure represents the hero's mastery over his life, because women are life. So if the hero gains her love, he has mastered his own life. He understands what his life and life in general is all about. So the whole idea of the hero's path is meant to be a general formula for men and women, regardless of where they are in life. The individual just needs to figure out where they stand within this general formula and let it assist him. You have to think, like, who and what are my orgs and monsters? Those represent unresolved issues. Then you need to ask yourself, well, what are my ideals in life? And this is an indication on your grasp on life. Your self-ignorance will then become more apparent and understandable for you, and an initiatory process will begin in your life. But you first have to go on an adventure into darkness, despair, and disgust. We will also, come into the realization that what we think life should be seldom corresponds to what life actually is. We'll have to admit to ourselves that we've participated in, self-protective, carnivorous patterns in our life that have been self-destructive, but perfectly normal. Now, the hero, realizing all this and accomplishing his tasks, signifies the fact that he's now a superior man or a god or a king or something. Oh, these wings look like crap. Absolute crap. What happened? And they just get bigger and bigger. Ugh. Wow, terrible. Okay, moving on. So, in more psychological terms, he has transcended his own darkness or ego. So this agony of having to break through darkness and limitations, our own personal limitations and ego, is the agony of personal growth. And these stories, along with other art and philosophy and math and all kinds of things, are the instruments to help us do this, to help us past our limiting beliefs into ever expanding consciousness and realizations. As our hero goes through trials and tests, conquering dragon after dragon, he breaks through his personal limitations and ego, and then he can realize his own potential. Now, the last part of the hero's journey is the return home. When the hero's quest is finished, he must still return home with his life transforming prize, whether that's wisdom or golden wool or a sleeping princess. He must take it back to his community, whether that's his nation or the planet or the whole universe. Sometimes this responsibility is refused. Doubt sets in. Maybe, society back home won't understand. But if the hero does go home with this new knowledge for his community, all of the magical creatures and guardians and familiars that he's met along the way will help and guide him on his return home as well. But sometimes the hero just simply does not want to return home because this new landscape that he's been to is just too wonderful. So in this case, there may need to be another one of those supernatural rescues, because the world or your past will always come calling. Society is jealous of those who choose to make a life away from it, whether that's physically or mentally. So this unwanted rescue then forces the hero home, along with the prize that he must bestow upon his community. Now, the two worlds that our hero has visited, the fantasy world or the divine world and the everyday normal world, are obviously very different from each other, as different as night and day. But nevertheless, and this is the key to understanding symbolism, the two worlds are actually one. The realm of fantasy, or of the gods, represent a dimension that we've forgotten. And the exploration of that dimension, whether willingly or unwillingly, is the whole point of the hero's journey. Values from our normal life that seemed so important before seem to kind of disappear after our visit to this supernatural world. We also get a better understanding of what's really important in life once we have assimilated into ourselves what we used to think of as only other, like somebody else is only that dark, not me. But now we understand that we hold, at least in potential, that same darkness. Now, just like stories of orgs that eat people, there can be a fear of losing our personal identification for those that are perhaps not ready for this type of an adventure. But our hero is ready, and he discovers that witches and hags are actually goddesses and dragons actually gods. So in other words, the things that we fear the most are actually the things that we need to face the most in order to grow and accomplish in life. So now that the hero is home, he must make these facts known to his fellow man. But how does somebody do that? I mean, how do you explain these types of adventures? You feel like kind of silly, like an idiot, like you're not articulating yourselves very well, kind of like how I feel right now. The hero may be tempted to just throw his hands up and let the idiots go about their stupid little lives. And he's like, I'll just stay here in my land of fantasy or with the gods in heaven. Also, how does the hero now, with his new understandings, not become distracted by the, everyday normal pain and joys of normal life? How does he knit the two worlds together? So you have to be able to pass back and forth between the two worlds, between the normal everyday world and the understandings gained from exploring the deeper archetypical aspects of the mind. How do you do that? Well, it takes a bit of talent. Nietzsche said that the cosmic dancer needs to be able to leap back and forth lightly and gracefully between different positions. So this is a way of saying that you need to be able to speak from one point of view while not invalidating another point of view. This also means that when it comes to mythology, particularly religious mythology, we may doubt whether certain aspects of it actually happened. That would not help us understand symbolism. It doesn't really matter whether Rip Van Winkle or Briar Rose or Jesus Christ actually existed. Their stories are what's important, and the fact that these stories are universal. The question of whether this or that carrier of a universal theme is historical is secondary. The stressing of the historical accurateness of it will just be confusing and obstruct the actual message. So this is what it means to be able to walk between both worlds, being able to appreciate the symbolism of something, of a teaching, without being dogmatic. And when the hero can do this, when he can explain his newfound knowledge to his fellow man, his return home is complete. So now the hero has been blessed with a vision transcending normal human understanding. And this amounts to a glimpse into the essential nature of the cosmos. He's been shown not just his own personal fate, but the fate of life in general. The macro and the micro, the atom and the solar systems have been opened to him, and in terms appropriate to his human understanding. So the themes of myth and religion are only vehicles of communication. They mustn't be confused for the final thing. No matter how impressive they may seem, they're still only means to understanding. The challenge is to keep the symbols translucent so that they don't block out the message they're trying to convey. We have seen in humanity's past what happens when you mistake the vehicle for its contents, if that makes sense. So the goal of the myth is to induce a reconciliation between the individual consciousness and the source of that consciousness. And it does this through trying to force a realization of the true relationship between the perishable aspects of life and the imperishable aspects of life. The hero, now with this realization, is a vehicle of universal law, whether he's a king or a peasant. Now, myths and tales are subject to change. A lot of the more archaic traits will be changed or eliminated to fit the current climate, the culture, and the times. And usually the lesson behind the tale will suffer in the process. And there's been, innumerable retellings of stories, whether that's, been changed intentionally or unintentionally, you don't really know, and it's kind of inevitable. So then secondary interpretations come about. Now, in these secondary interpretations, the key messages and archetypes are usually lost, and that's usually because these lessons or archetypes are no longer approved of. In Hellenistic Greece and Imperial Rome, the ancient gods were reduced to just, literary favorites, and themes like the Minotaur were completely reinterpreted, which we're going to come back around to the Minotaur. I got something to tell you about that. Now, whenever mythology is interpreted as either like science or history, it's kind of killed. The themes and images just kind of become some part of like a distant past. And the life goes out of it, goes out of the stories. And the link between the two perspectives, the two worlds, is completely dissolved. So in order to bring these images and ideas into our life, we have to look to the past. And then we'll be able to see again these themes and stories' permanent meaning. So now we're going to talk about the cosmogonic cycle. And here we are going to have to define some words again. So the word cosmogonic comes from the word cosmogony. Cosmogony is the study of the origin and development of the universe or of a particular system in the universe, such as a solar system. Or, and this is the sense that we'll be using it in, a theory or story of the origin and development of the universe, the solar system, or the Earth-Moon system. Now, it's not actually really that difficult to understand that the symbolism of myth and fairy tale correspond with our dreams, and that they have a psychological significance, especially after the works of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. It's hard to deny the fact that myths are the nature of dreams, and that dreams are symptomatic of the dynamics of the psyche. Now, even though Freud and Jung slightly had different opinions, there was a common shared principle, and that's the principle that the patterns of mythology and fairy tale correspond to dreams. So according to this, then it appears that through the world's tales and myth, symbolic expression is given to unconscious desires, fears, and intentions that underlie the patterns of human behavior. So in other words, mythology is psychology in a way. All we have to do is read it, study it, and come to an understanding that the deep forces that have shaped man's destiny continue to determine our own lives. So, but in order to fully grasp what we're learning here, we have to note that myths and dreams aren't exactly the same. Myths are not the spontaneous productions of sleep. They're quite opposite in a way. Stories are consciously thought through, written down, and edited, and their function is to serve as a language for communicating wisdom, just like dreams. So that's where they're similar. So to grasp the full value of mythological figures, we have to understand that they're not only symptoms of the unconscious, just like all thoughts are, but also messages of certain principles that have remained constant throughout human existence. So the function of myth and ritual then is to provide a way for the mind to comprehend a suggested truth, just like the stork. They are meant to move and awaken something in our mind. So then, things like Mount Olympus and the gods are interpreted by psychoanalysts as symbols of the unconscious. Modern psychological interpretation would be that the unconscious equals the metaphysical realm, and the metaphysical realm equals the unconscious. Just like Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. So then this is the formula of the cosmogonic cycle. The adventure of the hero represents the moment in a person's life when they've come to this understanding that the kingdom of God is within. The hero, yourself, has found how to open the door of light that is beyond the dark walls of our world. So then the kingdom of God is within and is the means to wake the sleeping princess, or our own soul. And the gods are symbolic personifications of the laws governing the universe. I think I got that right. Now, the cosmogonic cycle is normally shown as repeating itself over and over, kind of like, you know, how we sleep and wake throughout our lifetime. The cosmogonic cycle can also be thought of as the passage of universal consciousness through our deep dreamless sleep, then to our dream sleep, then to our full awakened state, and then back again. So then, if I'm understanding this correctly, universal consciousness is using symbols and archetypes within our own mind during our dreams to tell us something we need to know. And all of this cosmogonic cycle stuff suggests that our dreams and the archetypes they hold come from the same place that the whole universe comes from. That's exciting. Now, after saying all this, after going through this whole book, it has to be stated that there's no like official system for interpreting mythology. It's really up to us to figure out what these symbols and themes mean to us individually. Now, mythology has been interpreted in many different ways depending on the person's perspective. The modern day intellectual would say that, you know, it's just primitive man's explanation of nature, or as a way to entertain themselves, or as a collection of instructions to shape the individual to his group, or as a collective dream full of archetypes and symbolism. That's Carl Jung's interpretation, or as a way to reach a metaphysical insight, or as God's revelation to his children. That's religion's interpretation. But actually, mythology is all of these things. And again, these are all just opinions. But if you look at it from the point of view of how all of these ways of looking at mythology have helped humanity in the past, mythology actually really shows itself to be a useful tool for you and me today. The end. Whew, that was a crazy ride. I'm not gonna lie, this was a hard book for me to convey. I feel like, you know, I understood for the most part what the book was saying, but then to try and explain it is so difficult, and I did a terrible job. So please do not take this summary as some sort of great summarization of these ideas. Please actually get the book. Poor Joseph Campbell. He would probably be rolling over in his grave. Anyway, so I think the lesson, the overall lesson, is to be the hero in your own story. Do the things that scare you, because those are probably the things that are going to lead you to a wonderful life. And I should really take that advice. Now this book was so freaking good, but it gave me some crazy dreams. I mentioned the Minotaur earlier, and in the beginning of this book there was what I thought was a very terrifying story of this Minotaur and this queen that had to have him locked up in a labyrinth, and this hero that had to go in and kill it because it was like eating people and stuff. Anyway, that story gave me a nightmare where I was trapped in that labyrinth trying to run away from this Minotaur. And also the twins from The Shining were there. Anyway, I woke up like hyperventilating almost, just like breathing real heavy and very scared. And I think I know what this dream was telling me. Ugh. It's been hard to see my dreams differently now, which I think is a good thing. Please get this book. I'll link it below. It's not an affiliate link. It's just there for your convenience. But I would highly encourage you to read this. If you're into fairy tales like Disney and stuff like I am, this is gonna take your appreciation for those types of stories to a whole new level. You will not be able to watch a Disney movie, well, at least the older ones, the newer ones, but you will not be able to watch a retelling of a fairy tale or Greek mythology the same way ever again. I don't think you'll be able to look at anything the same way ever again. And I think that's good. And if you have read this book, let me know if that has happened to you. Are you able to just have a dream now and be like, oh, that was just a dream? I can't. Can you watch movies the same way still? I can't. Also, if there's any books that you would like me to do a terrible summary of, let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, well, let me know by giving it a like. It's how I know what kind of videos I should be working on. Make sure and subscribe and hit the notifications bell so that you won't miss another terrible summary of a great book. And I will see you in the next one. Bye! If you're thinking about reading this book, this would actually be a really good book. And in these caves, there are Did you go potty? Where are you? Huh? What happened? Huh? Did you go potty? Let me see. Personal darknesses. No, Bubs, you have to get up on the bed yourself. You can do it. You can do it. This wisdom and prize. Now, the two worlds that our hero has visited, the fantasy world or the, world, and when the hero can do this, he can now relay his newfound knowledge to his fellow man, and his now myths and tales are, and if you have read me